The sound of a hand striking flesh echoed through the obsidian lounge like a gunshot. It was loud enough to silence the jazz music playing softly in the background, and sharp enough to make every wealthy head in the private terminal turn in unison. The burning sensation on Simone Sterling's cheek was immediate radiating heat that matched the sudden red mark blooming across her dark skin. She stumbled back slightly instinctively, curling her body around the 2-year-old toddler in her arms. Little Luna, who had been sleeping peacefully against her mother's chest just seconds ago, let out a terrified shriek as the violence of the movement woke her. "You clumsy little animal." The voice was high-pitched and dripping with venom. Victoria Thorne stood there, her chest heaving, her manicured hand still raised in the follow-through of the slap. She looked like a statue of expensive fury. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, catching the light of the crystal chandeliers above. But her eyes were ugly, narrowed into slits of pure hatred as she looked down at Simone. "Look at what you did. Look at it." Victoria pointed a shaking finger at the oversized handbag hanging from her arm. It was a white Himalaya Birkin, the kind of bag that cost more than most people's college tuition. A dark, ugly stain of lukewarm latte was slowly dripping down the pristine crocodile leather, pooling onto the marble floor. "You ruined a $50,000 bag. You could sell your life and your ugly child, and you still would not be able to pay for the zipper on this thing." Simone did not speak immediately. She could taste copper in her mouth where her tooth had cut her lip. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but not from fear. It was a cold, hard rhythm of suppressed rage. She shifted Luna to her other hip, her hand rubbing the toddler's back in soothing circles, whispering soft hush sounds to calm the crying child. To the onlookers, Simone looked like exactly what Victoria was treating her as. She was wearing a gray oversized sweatsuit, comfortable for travel but looking worn out. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun with flyaways, framing a face devoid of makeup. She looked exhausted. She looked like help. She looked like someone who did not belong in the most exclusive airport lounge in Aspen. Victoria took a step closer, invading Simone's personal space with the scent of expensive perfume and entitlement. "I am talking to you. Are you deaf as well as stupid? How did you even get in here? Did you sneak in behind a real person, or are you the nanny for someone actually important?" Simone finally looked up. Her eyes were dark and unreadable. She did not cower. She did not apologize. She simply stared at the woman who had just assaulted her. In that silence, a small, subtle vibration buzzed against Simone's left wrist. It was her smartwatch. She glanced down for a fraction of a second, ignoring Victoria's screeching for just a heartbeat. The screen of the watch glowed with a simple notification. "Transaction complete. Asset transfer finalized. The Obsidian Lounge and Hospitality Group. 100% ownership verified. Time: 11:50 a.m. Simone let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. 10 minutes. She was 10 minutes early. Technically, as of 30 seconds ago, she owned the floor she was standing on. She owned the chandeliers above them. She owned the contract of the security guard standing by the door. And most satisfyingly, she owned the right to decide who stayed and who left. But Victoria Thorne did not know that. Victoria only saw a woman in sweatpants who hadn't apologized for ruining a purse. "Are you ignoring me?" Victoria's voice went up an octave. She looked around the room, seeking validation from the other travelers. "Can you believe this arrogance? She ruins my property, assaults me with her clumsiness, and then stands there staring at me like a cow." A few people in the lounge chuckled nervously. Most just watched, their eyes darting between the furious socialite and the silent mother. Phones were starting to come out. Simone could see the camera lenses pointed in their direction. She knew exactly what they were seeing. A wealthy white woman disciplining a black woman who looked out of place. The narrative was already being written in their heads. Simone finally spoke. Her voice was calm, shockingly steady, given the violence she had just endured. "You hit me. You just physically assaulted me while I was holding my child." Victoria laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. "Assault, please. I was defending my property. And do not try to play the victim with me. I know your type. You are looking for a payout. You probably spilled that coffee on purpose just so you could cause a scene and sue me. Well, it is not going to work. I am Victoria Thorne. My husband is Senator Thorne. Do you know what that means? It means I can have you arrested for looking at me the wrong way. Simone shifted her weight. Luna had stopped screaming, but was now whimpering, burying her wet face into Simone's neck. The weight of the child was grounding. I do not care who your husband is, Simone said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. You need to step back, now. Victoria's eyes widened. She wasn't used to resistance. She was used to fear. She was used to apologies. This defiance was an insult greater than the coffee stain. You want me to step back? Victoria sneered. She looked down at the diaper bag sitting at Simone's feet. It was a practical, well-worn backpack open slightly at the top. I will step back when you clean up this mess. Before Simone could react, Victoria lunged forward. She did not go for Simone. She went for the bag. With a violent jerk, she grabbed the strap of the diaper bag and upended it. Everything inside went flying. It was a chaotic shower of personal, intimate items. A half-empty bottle of milk splashed across the polished floor. Clean diapers scattered like confetti. A small, worn-out stuffed rabbit skidded under a chair. Wet wipes, a changing pad, and a few granola bars landed in a heap near Simone's sneakers. The sound of the plastic bottle hitting the marble was the only sound in the room for a long second. There, Victoria said, breathless from her exertion. Now you look like you are in your natural habitat, surrounded by trash. The humiliation was visceral. Simone felt the heat rise up her neck. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was a violation of her role as a mother. Those were her daughter's things. That was the milk she had pumped before the flight. That was Luna's favorite toy. It was an exposure of the messy private reality of motherhood thrown onto the floor for strangers to judge. A man in a business suit near the window shook his head, muttering loud enough to be heard. Disgusting. They really should have better screening at the door. A woman sipping champagne whispered to her companion, I hope she cleans that up. I don't want to smell sour milk while I wait for my flight. The crowd had chosen a side, and it wasn't the mother in the sweatsuit. Victoria stood amidst the scattered baby supplies, looking triumphant. She crossed her arms, checking her diamond watch. Now, she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to get down on your knees. You are going to take those wet wipes that are all over the floor, and you are going to scrub every inch of my Birkin until I say it is clean. And then you are going to apologize to me for ruining my morning. Simone stared at the woman. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. And if I don't? Simone asked softly. Victoria smiled, a cruel twisting of red lips. If you don't, then I call security. I tell them you attacked me. I tell them you are erratic, unstable. And look at you. Look at this mess. Who do you think they will believe? The wife of a senator, or the woman who looks like she dug her clothes out of a donation bin? Victoria leaned in, dropping her voice to a whisper that only Simone could hear. And when the police come, they call Child Protective Services. They take that crying brat away from you. Because clearly you are unfit to care for her if you are starting fights in airports. Do you want to lose your baby over a coffee stain? The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was the ultimate weapon. Victoria knew exactly which button to press. For a black mother in America, the threat of the system taking her child was not a paranoid fantasy. It was a terrifying reality. Simone felt a cold chill run down her spine. Her arms tightened around Luna instinctively. She looked at the spilled milk. She looked at the dirty floor. She looked at Victoria's smug face. The room waited. The wealthy onlookers leaned forward, eager to see the submission. They wanted to see the natural order restored. They wanted the intruder to bow down. Simone took a slow breath. She thought about the notification on her watch. She thought about the $4 billion empire she had built from her kitchen table. She thought about the power she held in her bank account, power that could buy and sell everyone in this room 10 times over. But right now, none of them saw the CEO. They only saw the target. Victoria tapped her foot impatiently. I am waiting. Knees. Now. Simone slowly bent her knees. Victoria's smile widened. The crowd relaxed, satisfied that the show was reaching its expected conclusion. But Simone did not kneel. She bent down, picked up the small, worn-out stuffed rabbit that had skidded near her foot. She dusted it off with deliberate care. Then she stood back up to her full height. She was taller than Victoria. Without the slouch of exhaustion, standing with her spine steel straight, she towered over the senator's wife. She handed the toy to Luna, who hugged it tight and quieted down. Then Simone looked Victoria dead in the eye. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Simone said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the silent room. Victoria blinked, confused by the lack of fear. "Excuse me," I said. Simone continued, stepping over the spilled milk, closing the distance between them until she was looking down her nose at the other woman. "You made a mistake. You think because I am wearing sweatpants, I am weak. You think because I am quiet, I am scared. And you think because you have a title by marriage, you have power." Simone tilted her head. "But you have no idea what real power looks like. You want me to clean your bag? You want me to kneel?" Simone let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded devoid of any humor. "I suggest you look at your shoes, Victoria, because you are standing in the middle of a mess you created. And in about 5 minutes, you are going to be the one begging. And I promise you I will not be as forgiving as the system you think is going to protect you." Victoria's face flushed red. She stepped back, looking insulted and suddenly irrationally nervous. The confidence in Simone's voice didn't match the script. "You are crazy," Victoria sputtered. "You are actually insane." "Security." Victoria turned and screamed toward the entrance, her voice shrill. "Security, get this trash out of here. She is threatening me." The heavy double doors of the lounge burst open, but it wasn't just a regular guard who walked in. It was Brad Miller, the general manager of the lounge. He was a tall man with a fake tan and a suit that was a little too tight. He was also, as everyone in the local social circle knew, Victoria's brother-in-law. He saw the scene immediately. The spilled milk, the crying baby, and his sister-in-law pointing an accusing finger at a black woman in a sweatsuit. He didn't need to ask questions. He knew exactly whose side he was on. "What is going on here?" Brad demanded, marching over with 4 uniformed security guards trailing behind him like attack dogs. Brad Victoria cried out, playing the victim instantly. "Thank God. This woman attacked me. She threw her milk at me. She ruined my Birkin. And she threatened to hurt me." Brad turned his gaze on Simone. His eyes swept over her cheap-looking clothes, the mess on the floor, and the defiant look on her face. He didn't see a customer. He saw a problem. He saw a stain on his exclusive floor. "Is this true?" Brad barked at Simone. Simone looked at him. She recognized the look in his eyes. It was the same look she had seen 1,000 times before she made her first million. It was the look of a man who had already decided she was guilty. "Check the cameras," Simone said calmly. "Your sister-in-law slapped me and threw my bag." "I don't need to check anything," Brad sneered. "I know Mrs. Thorne. She is a pillar of this community, and you are trespassing." He turned to the guards. "Get her out of here, and call the police. I want to press charges for assault and destruction of property." He looked back at Simone, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "And call child services. We can't have a child in the custody of a violent transient." The guard stepped forward, reaching for Simone, reaching for Luna. Simone tightened her grip on her daughter. The escalation had reached the breaking point. They were not just insulting her anymore. They were coming for her child. "Don't touch me," Simone warned, her voice vibrating with a low, dangerous frequency. Or what Brad challenged, stepping into her face. "You will hit me too. Go ahead, make my day." He reached out and grabbed Simone's arm, his fingers digging into the fabric of her sweatshirt. That was the second mistake. Simone didn't pull away. Instead, she used her free hand to reach into her pocket. She didn't pull out a weapon. She didn't pull out a phone. She pulled out a card. It wasn't a credit card. It wasn't a debit card. It was a thick, heavy slab of anodized titanium. It was black. Matte black. With no numbers on the front. Just a single small chip and a name laser etched in silver. "Take your hand off me," Simone said. and run this." Brad looked at the card. He laughed. He actually laughed. "What is this, a library card? A fake ID?" He snatched the card from her hand. He held it up to the light, mocking it. "I have been in this industry 15 years, honey. I know every black card, every centurion card, every platinum card in existence. And this," he flicked the metal card with his finger. "This is a toy. It is a prop. Just like you are playing pretend at being a VIP." He looked at the guards. "Grab her and throw this piece of junk in the trash." Brad tossed the titanium card toward the nearest garbage can. It missed, skidding across the marble floor with a distinct, heavy metallic ring. The sound of the card hitting the floor seemed to echo louder than the slap had. Simone watched the card slide away. Then she looked back at Brad. Her expression had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by something much colder, something final. "You should have checked the name," Simone said softly. "What?" Brad asked, signaling the guards to move in. "You should have checked the name on the card," she repeated. "Because you just threw away your career." Before Brad could respond, a voice rang out from the back of the lounge. "Hey." It was a young girl, maybe 19, sitting in a corner booth. She was holding a phone up, a ring light attached to it. "Hey, Mr. Manager, you might want to pick that up." Brad frowned, annoyed at the interruption. "Mind your business, kid." "I am minding my business," the girl shouted back. "I am live streaming this, and about 50,000 people just saw you throw Simone Sterling's card in the trash." The room went deadly silent. The name hung in the air. Sterling. Brad froze. His hand, which was reaching for Simone's shoulder, again stopped in midair. Victoria, who had been smirking in the background, felt her stomach drop. "Simone," Sterling, Brad whispered. The girl with the phone stood up. "Yeah, the founder of Melanin Glow. The woman who was on the cover of Forbes last month, the woman who just bought..." The girl looked at her phone screen, reading a comment. "Wait, the comments are saying she just bought this airport. Like the whole thing." Brad's face turned a color that matched the spilled milk on the floor. He slowly, very slowly, turned his head to look at the woman in the sweatpants. Simone smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Pick it up," she said. Brad swallowed hard. What I said, pick it up." Simone pointed to the card lying on the floor near the trash can. "Pick up my card. Wipe it off. And bring it to me." Brad looked at Victoria. Victoria was pale, her hand covering her mouth. She recognized the name now. Everyone knew the name. She just had never seen the face because Simone Sterling was famously private. And she had just slapped her. I think there has been a misunderstanding," Brad stammered, his voice trembling. Simone took a step forward. The guards instinctively stepped back, sensing the shift in power. "There is no misunderstanding, Brad. You called me a transient. You threatened to take my daughter. And you threw my property at a garbage can." Simone checked her watch again. "It is 12:05. I officially own this building, which means you are currently trespassing on my property." She looked him dead in the eye. "Pick up the card." Brad's knees shook. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a man watching his life implode. Slowly, painfully under the gaze of every wealthy patron and 50,000 live stream viewers, Brad Miller knelt down. He crawled toward the trash can. He reached out and picked up the black titanium card. He wiped it on his sleeve, his hand shaking so badly he almost dropped it again. He walked back to Simone, his head bowed, and held it out with two hands like an offering. "Ms. Sterling, I had no idea." Simone didn't take the card immediately. She let him stand there, sweating, terrified. She looked at Victoria, who was trying to edge away toward the exit. "Where are you going?" Victoria, Simone called out. "We haven't even discussed the bag yet." Victoria froze. Simone took the card from Brad's trembling hand. She slipped it back into her pocket. Now she said, her voice clear and commanding. "Since you like calling the police so much, Brad, go ahead. Call them." Brad blinked, confused. "Call the police? For who?" "For you," Simone said. "And for your sister-in-law. Because when they get here, I am pressing charges. And unlike you, I have the footage, I have the witnesses, and I have the best lawyers money can buy coming through that door in about 30 seconds. As if on cue, the sound of sirens could be heard wailing in the distance, getting closer to the tarmac. Simone looked down at Luna, who was now playing quietly with her rabbit. She kissed the top of her daughter's head. Then she looked back at the two people who had tried to break her. "I told you," she whispered. "You made a big mistake. You think the sirens are for you." Brad laughed, a sound that bordered on hysterical. He stood up, dusting the lint off his suit trousers where he had just been kneeling. The humiliation of a moment ago had curdled into something uglier, something desperate. He looked at the flashing blue and red lights reflecting against the glass walls of the terminal. The police were seconds away. He realized he had one chance to control the narrative. If he could get her in handcuffs before the officers walked through the door, he won the visual war. He turned to the security team, his face twisting into a mask of authority. "Restrain her. Now. She is erratic. She is threatening staff. I want her in cuffs before the police step foot in this lobby." The four guards hesitated for a fraction of a second, looking at the woman who stood like a statue in the center of the room. But the paycheck came from Brad. They stepped forward, closing the circle. The heavy jingle of handcuffs being unclipped from a belt loop echoed in the sudden silence. Simone tightened her grip on Luna. The little girl buried her face in the crook of her mother's neck, sensing the danger closing in. Simone stepped back until her shoulders hit the cold glass of the window. She was cornered. "One phone call," Simone said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the tension like a blade. The lead guard paused, looking back at Brad for instruction. Brad sneered. He felt his power returning as the guards surrounded her. "A phone call. You think this is the movies? You don't get a phone call until you are processed at the station, honey." "It is my legal right," Simone stated, her eyes locking onto Brad's. "Unless you want to add kidnapping and unlawful detainment to the list of lawsuits I am already filing against you." Brad rolled his eyes, performing for the audience of wealthy travelers watching with bated breath. "Fine. Let her make her call. Let everyone see who she calls." He stepped closer, invading her personal space again, his voice dropping to a mocking whisper that the live stream microphone still managed to pick up perfectly. "Who are you going to call? Your baby daddy. Some low-level dealer from the block to come post your bail. Tell him to bring cash. We do not accept food stamps for bail bonds here in Aspen." Victoria Thorne let out a sharp, cruel giggle from behind him. "Probably calling her caseworker," Victoria muttered, trying to explain why she is getting arrested with a baby. Simone did not flinch. She did not respond to the insults. She did not even look at them anymore. Her entire focus shifted to the slim device in her hand. She tapped the screen twice. The room was so quiet that the sound of the dialing tone ringing out on speakerphone seemed deafening. Ring, ring. Everyone leaned in. The camera phone held by the teenager in the corner zoomed in on Simone's face. Brad crossed his arms, a smirk plastered on his face, waiting to hear some slang-filled voice on the other end that would prove his point. The call connected. There was a brief burst of background noise. The distinct high-pitched whine of a turbine engine powering down. The sound of expensive leather shifting. And then a voice. It was a male voice. Deep. Resonant. The kind of voice that sounded like it was used to giving orders that shifted stock markets. It was warm, but it carried an undercurrent of absolute power. Kendrick Simone said, "I am here, baby." Kendrick Sterling's voice filled the lounge clear and crisp through the high-quality speakers of the phone. "We just touched down on runway 1. The pilot is taxiing to the private hangar now. I can see the main terminal from my window." Brad's smirk faltered slightly. The background noise did not sound like a street corner. It sounded like a Gulfstream jet. "Are you okay?" Kendrick asked, his tone shifting from casual to concerned. "Why do you sound breathless? Is the acquisition complete? Did the legal team send over the final documents for the transfer?" Simone took a deep breath. She looked at Brad. She looked at the handcuffs dangling from the guard's hand. She looked at Victoria, who was clutching her Birkin bag like a shield. "No, Kendrick. It is not done." "Why? What happened?" Simone let the words fall into the room, heavy and deliberate. I am currently being cornered by 4 security guards. They are holding handcuffs. The silence on the other end of the line was terrifying. The background noise of the jet engine seemed to vanish. Explain. Kendrick's voice dropped. The warmth was gone. It was replaced by a tone so cold it could have frozen the coffee on the floor. I am in the Obsidian Lounge. The general manager, a man named Brad Miller, and the wife of Senator Thorne are here. Simone paused, making sure every syllable was heard. Mrs. Thorne slapped me in the face while I was holding Luna. On the other end of the line, there was a sound of movement, sharp, violent, like a seatbelt being unbuckled with force. She did what? She slapped me. Then she threw Luna's diaper bag across the room. Simone continued, her eyes never leaving Brad's pale face. And then Brad Miller instructed his security team to detain me. He took my Centurion card and threw it in the trash. He called it a fake. Simone felt Luna stir in her arms. Her voice broke just for a second, revealing the mother beneath the CEO. And Kendrick. They threatened to call Child Protective Services. They said I was unfit. They said they were going to take Luna away from me because I looked like a transient. The reaction was immediate. There was no shouting, no screaming, just a sound that was far more frightening. Brad Miller heard the sound of a heavy door being kicked open on the other end of the line. He heard the rush of wind. He heard the rapid cadence of footsteps on metal stairs. "Keep the line open, Simone." Kendrick's voice was now a growl, a primal protective sound that made the hair on the back of Brad's neck stand up. "Do not let them touch you. Do not let them touch a single hair on Luna's head. Kendrick, the police are here. I can hear the sirens." "Good. Let them come. They will need witnesses for what I am about to do to that man's career." The sound of a car door slamming shut echoed through the speakerphone. "I am 3 minutes away. The entire legal counsel of Sterling Vanguard is with me. And Simone. Yes, tell Mr. Miller to look out the window. Tell him to watch the tarmac, because the storm he just invited into his life is approaching at 80 miles per hour. The click of the call ending sounded like a judge bringing down a gavel. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and thick with unasked questions. Brad Miller stood frozen, his hands still hovering near his belt where his radio sat. He blinked, trying to process the voice he had just heard. Kendrick. The name bounced around inside his skull, trying to find a purchase. It sounded familiar. It sounded authoritative. It carried the specific cadence of a man who was used to people jumping when he whispered. But it didn't make sense. Not here. Not with this woman. Brad looked at Simone. She hadn't moved. She was still pressed against the glass, holding her daughter, but something had changed. The fear was gone from her posture. She was no longer a cornered animal. She was a hunter waiting for the trap to spring. Victoria Thorne was the first to break the silence, though her voice lacked its usual venomous bite. She adjusted the strap of her ruined Birkin bag, her forehead creased in a frown of genuine confusion. She looked at Brad, then back at Simone, her eyes narrowing as she tried to reconcile the image of the woman in the stained sweatpants with the voice on the speakerphone. Kendrick Victoria whispered, testing the name on her tongue. Why does that name sound so familiar? She looked at Simone with a mixture of suspicion and distaste. Who was that? Victoria demanded, her voice rising again as she tried to regain control of the situation. Who did you just call? Was that some kind of trick? A recording? Because I know the voice of every important man in this state, and I do not know any Kendricks who would associate with the likes of you. Brad let out a breath he had been holding. Of course, it was a trick. It had to be. He shook his head, a nervous smile creeping back onto his face. The panic that had flared in his chest for a second began to subside, replaced by a fresh wave of irritation. It is a bluff, Victoria. Brad said loud enough for the guards to hear. She is trying to scare us. She probably had a friend play a recording of a movie villain or something. Look at her. Brad gestured wildly at Simone, his hands sweeping up and down her body in a dismissal of her entire existence. She is wearing a $10 tracksuit. Her hair is a mess. She is carrying a backpack that looks like it survived a war zone. People who know men with private jets do not look like her. They do not travel like her. And they certainly do not let their children cry in public lounges. He turned to the guards, his confidence returning with a vengeance. Proceed with the arrest. I am tired of this theater. Get those cuffs on her now before she pulls another stunt. But the guards did not move. Their eyes were fixed on a point behind Brad's shoulder. Brad frowned. He turned around. Standing on top of one of the velvet armchairs in the corner was the teenage girl, the one with the ring light, the one he had dismissed earlier, Jada. She wasn't sitting anymore. She was standing tall, her phone held high like a torch, the bright light blinding Brad for a moment. The girl was shouting, not at her phone, but at him. "Hey, Mr. Manager." Brad shielded his eyes, squinting at the girl. "Sit down, kid. This is a police matter now. It is about to be a global matter," Jada screamed back, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "Do you have any idea what you just did? Do you have any idea who you are talking to?" Brad felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his spine. The girl sounded terrified, but not for herself. She sounded terrified for him. "I don't care who she is," Brad snapped. "She is a trespasser. She is Simone Sterling." Jada yelled the name, ripping through the lounge like a physical blow. The murmur of the crowd stopped instantly. Every head turned. Even the bartenders stopped pouring drinks. Victoria Thorne gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. The name hit her like a splash of ice water. Simone Sterling. The cover of Essence. The cover of Forbes. The woman who had turned a kitchen experiment into a $4 billion biotech empire in 5 years. Victoria used her products. She had a bottle of melanin glow serum on her vanity table right now. "No," Victoria breathed, shaking her head in denial. "No. That is impossible. Simone Sterling is... She is glamorous. She wears couture. She does not look like... this." Jada wasn't finished. She turned her phone screen around so Brad could see it. The numbers on the top left corner were scrolling so fast they were a blur. "Look at the count. Brad, look at it, 150,000 people." Jada's voice cracked. "They are watching you live right now. They saw you throw the card. They saw you threaten the baby." And the comments. "They are tagging the NAACP. They are tagging the governor. They are tagging CNN. You are trending #1 worldwide, you idiot." Brad stared at the screen. The number 150,000 glowed in red. Beside it, a waterfall of comments flowed upward at dizzying speed. He caught snippets of words. "Fire him. Racist. Boycott. Sterling Vanguard. Lawsuit. End him." The blood drained from Brad's face so fast it left him dizzy. The room seemed to tilt. He looked back at Simone. She was still watching him. Her expression hadn't changed. It was the calm, detached look of a scientist observing a specimen in a jar. "Simone," Sterling Brad whispered. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. He looked at her shoes again. Sneakers. Scuffed. But were they? He looked closer. They weren't generic. They were limited edition vintage prototypes. He looked at the sweatsuit. It wasn't old. It was cashmere. High-grade, nondescript, silent luxury cashmere. The kind that cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. "No," Brad muttered, shaking his head violently. "No, no, no. This is a mistake." He turned to Victoria, pleading for her to make sense of it. "Victoria, tell them. Tell them she is a fraud. You know these people. This is an imposter, right? Someone looking for a settlement." But Victoria was backing away. She was physically distancing herself from him. Her eyes were wide, fixed on Simone with a dawning horror. She called Kendrick. Victoria whispered, her voice trembling. Kendrick Sterling, her husband, the tech mogul. He bought the airline last year. He bought the bank. Victoria looked at Brad, and for the first time he saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. "Brad, you idiot! You just arrested the owner's wife." Brad felt like he couldn't breathe. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Denial was his only shield left. If he admitted this was true, his life was over. His career, his reputation, his pension, everything he had built for 15 years would be gone. "It is not true," Brad screamed, his voice cracking. He grabbed the radio from his belt, his fingers fumbling with the buttons. He pressed the talk button so hard, his knuckle turned white. "Front desk. Sarah. Sarah, answer me." The radio crackled with static. Go ahead, Brad. Check the manifest. Brad yelled into the device, spitting saliva. Check the VIP arrival list for today. Right now, search for the name Sterling. There was a pause, a long, agonizing pause. Brad stared at the radio, willing it to give him the answer he wanted. He wanted Sarah to say there was no such name. He wanted Sarah to say that the only Sterling on the list was some old man from Texas. I am checking now. Sarah's voice came back sounding confused. But the system is acting weird. It is updating. What do you mean, updating? Brad shrieked. Just read the list. It says, oh my God. What? What does it say? The radio crackled again. Brad, the entire manifest just changed. All the names are gone. There is only one name on the screen now. It is locked. I can't scroll. I can't exit. Read it. Brad roared, sweat pouring down his forehead. It says owner. Sarah's voice trembled. It says Simone Sterling. And underneath it, it says access level infinity. Brad, what is going on? The screen is flashing red. It says Security Protocol Alpha initiated by Central Command. Brad lowered the radio slowly. His hand was shaking so bad he almost dropped it. He looked up. Simone Sterling took one step forward. Just one. But it felt like she had crossed an ocean. She didn't scream. She didn't shout. She simply raised her eyebrow, a gesture of supreme dominance. You were saying something about my clothes, Brad, she asked softly. Brad opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the guards. They had lowered the handcuffs. They were backing away from Simone, putting distance between themselves and their boss. They knew. Everyone knew. The illusion of his power had shattered. He wasn't the gatekeeper anymore. He was the intruder. And outside the window, the massive, sleek shape of a black Gulfstream jet with the Sterling logo on the tail was turning toward the private gate, its engines screaming like a dragon coming home to defend its nest. Brad Miller looked at the floor, confused. Then he looked at the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows that faced the drop-off zone. The source of the vibration wasn't an earthquake. It was a convoy. 3 matte black Cadillac Escalades screeched to a halt right outside the glass doors. They didn't park politely in the designated spots. They swarmed the entrance, mounting the curb with aggressive precision, blocking the entire driveway. The tires smoked as the heavy vehicles came to a sudden stop. Before the wheels had even stopped turning, the doors flew open. The first people out weren't passengers. They were giants. 4 men each over 6'4", wearing earpieces and suits that struggled to contain their bulk. They moved with military synchronization, scanning the perimeter, their eyes hidden behind dark glasses, even though they were indoors. Then from the middle vehicle, 6 men and women in sharp gray suits stepped out. They carried leather briefcases and walked with the predatory speed of sharks smelling blood in the water. These weren't just lawyers. This was a legal hit squad. Finally, the rear door of the lead SUV opened. Kendrick Sterling stepped out. The atmosphere in the lounge didn't just shift. It evaporated. Kendrick stood at 6'3", a towering figure of suppressed rage, wrapped in a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than Brad Miller made in a year. He didn't look at the building. He didn't look at the security cameras. He looked straight through the glass doors, locking his eyes onto the corner where his wife was trapped. He didn't wait for the automatic doors to slide open. He pushed through them with enough force that the mechanism groaned in protest. Brad Miller felt his knees unlock. He had seen powerful men before. He had seen senators. He had seen movie stars. But he had never seen an apex predator walking toward him with the intent to kill. Kendrick didn't say a word. He walked into the lounge, his stride long and purposeful. The 4 security guards that Brad had commanded to arrest Simone were standing in his path, forming a loose blockade. Move, Kendrick said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command of nature. One of the guards, a young man who clearly didn't watch the news, made the mistake of stepping forward, putting a hand up to stop him. Sir, you cannot be in here without a... Kendrick didn't even slow down. He didn't break stride. He simply extended his arm and shoved the guard aside. The motion was fluid and effortless, but the guard went flying backward as if he had been hit by a truck crashing into a decorative plant stand. The other 3 guards scrambled out of the way, pressing themselves against the wall to escape the path of the oncoming storm. Kendrick reached the corner. The terrifying aura of violence that radiated off him vanished the second he looked at Simone. He dropped to one knee, ignoring the expensive fabric of his trousers against the floor. He wrapped his massive arms around Simone and Luna, pulling them into his chest. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Simone shook her head, burying her face in his shoulder. She was shaking now, the adrenaline finally wearing off. "I am okay," she whispered, but they scared Luna. Kendrick tightened his hold for a second, kissing the top of his daughter's head. Then he stood up. When he turned around, the tenderness was gone. His face was a mask of cold, hard granite. He looked at the room. He looked at the crowd of wealthy onlookers who were now deathly silent. He looked at Victoria Thorne, who was trying to hide behind a pillar. And finally his eyes landed on Brad Miller. Brad was trembling. He was trying to stand up straight, trying to muster some shred of authority, but under Kendrick's gaze, he looked like a child caught stealing. "Are you Brad Miller?" Kendrick asked. The voice was low, deceptively calm, but everyone in the room could hear the violence coiling underneath it. Brad swallowed hard. His throat clicked dryly. "Yes. Yes, sir. I am the general manager here." Kendrick took a step forward. The 6 lawyers fanned out behind him, opening their briefcases and pulling out documents with practiced efficiency. The 4 bodyguards took up positions at the exits, effectively sealing the room. Brad Miller Kendrick repeated, testing the name like it was a piece of rotten meat. I was just following procedure, sir." Brad stammered, his hands shaking as he held them up in a gesture of surrender. "We had a disturbance. A passenger was aggressive. I was just trying to maintain order. It is standard protocol." Kendrick tilted his head slightly. "Protocol?" He took another step. He was now looming over Brad, blocking out the light from the chandeliers. "Your protocol involves 4 men cornering a woman holding a toddler. Your protocol involves allowing another passenger to physically assault my wife." Kendrick reached into his pocket. Brad flinched, thinking he was reaching for a weapon. But Kendrick pulled out a phone. He tapped the screen and held it up. It was a still image from the security feed, which his team had hacked into minutes ago. It showed Victoria Thorne's hand making contact with Simone's face. "Is this your protocol?" Kendrick asked, his voice rising slightly. Brad stared at the image. He couldn't speak. "And the card," Kendrick said, putting the phone away. "My wife tells me you destroyed her payment method." Brad looked down at his feet. I thought it was fake, sir. It didn't look like a standard bank card. I thought she was trying to commit fraud." Kendrick let out a dark, humorless laugh. "You thought it was fake." Kendrick reached into his own pocket and pulled out a wallet. He extracted a card. It was identical to the one Simone had. Matte black titanium. "Do you know why you have never seen this card before, Mr. Miller?" Brad shook his head, unable to form words. "You haven't seen it because there are only 2 of them in existence," Kendrick said. "One in my pocket, and one in my wife's pocket." Kendrick held the card up, catching the light. "You said you were worried about fraud. You said you were protecting the bank." Kendrick leaned in close, so close that Brad could smell the expensive cologne, mixed with the scent of jet fuel. "I am the bank, Brad." The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. "Sterling Financial acquired the underwriting rights for this credit line 3 months ago," Kendrick continued, his voice cold and precise. "When you snapped that card, you didn't just break a piece of plastic. You destroyed the property of the chairman of the board." Kendrick turned to the lawyers behind him. "Mr. Henderson, what is the penalty for willful destruction of bank property combined with unlawful detainment of the majority shareholder?" The lead lawyer, a sharp-faced man with glasses, didn't even look up from his tablet. "Felony destruction of property, kidnapping, assault, and civil rights violations under state and federal law. Mr. Sterling, we are looking at a minimum of 10 years in federal prison, plus civil damages." Kendrick looked back at Brad. 10 years, Brad? That is a lot of time to think about protocol." Brad's legs finally gave out. He stumbled back, grabbing the edge of the reception desk to keep from falling. He looked at Victoria, desperate for help, but she was already typing furiously on her phone, probably calling her husband, probably trying to throw Brad under the bus to save herself. Kendrick didn't let up. "But before we send you to prison," Kendrick said, adjusting his cufflinks, "we have a business matter to settle." He gestured to Simone. "My wife tells me she owns this building now, which means as of 5 minutes ago, you work for her." Kendrick stepped aside, clearing the path between Brad and Simone. "And I believe she has some instructions for you." Kendrick stepped back, creating a wide berth of space around his wife. The protective fury in his eyes softened for a fraction of a second as Simone turned to him. She didn't say a word. She simply held out her arms, and Kendrick took Luna into his embrace. The little girl, sensing the shift in energy, rested her head against her father's suit jacket, finally safe. With her hands empty, Simone stood up straighter. She reached down and smoothed the front of her gray sweatsuit. It was a simple gesture, something a person might do before sitting down for coffee, but in this moment, it looked like a warrior adjusting their armor before an execution. She brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear, her face devoid of the exhaustion that had plagued her just minutes ago. The transformation was complete. The tired mother was gone. The CEO had arrived. Simone took a step toward Brad Miller. The sound of her sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished marble floor echoed like a gunshot in the silent terminal. Brad flinched. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the wind to push him over. Simone stopped 3 feet away from him. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked bored. She looked like she was looking at a spreadsheet error that needed to be deleted. She lifted her wrist, checking the smartwatch that had notified her earlier. 12:05. Simone announced, her voice calm and crisp. She looked up at the digital clock hanging above the departures board. The transfer of assets was scheduled for noon. The grace period for system integration is 5 minutes, which means, as of right now, the servers have fully reset. Brad blinked, sweat stinging his eyes. I don't understand," he whispered. "You don't need to understand, Brad. You just need to watch." Simone pulled a second phone from her pocket. This wasn't the personal phone she had used to call Kendrick. This was a prototype device, sleek and buttonless. She tapped the screen, opening an application that was only available to 3 people in the world. The interface glowed blue. It was the master control for the Sterling Vanguard building management system. With a single casual tap of her thumb, Simone initiated the rebranding protocol. The effect was instantaneous and terrifyingly absolute. All around the lounge, the massive LED screens that had been displaying the gold and black logo of the Obsidian Group flickered. They went black for a heartbeat. Then, in a blaze of white and sapphire light, they roared back to life. The elegant cursive script of the old ownership vanished. In its place, the sharp, modern architectural logo of Sterling Vanguard dominated every pixel in the room. The flight information boards changed. The digital menus behind the bar changed. Even the small touchscreens on the customer service kiosks rebooted, flashing the name Sterling over and over again. The lounge was bathed in the cool blue light of the new regime. The crowd gasped. Phones were held up higher to capture the takeover. It was a digital conquest executed in silence, more powerful than any shout could have been. Simone held the phone up so Brad could see the confirmation screen. Status owner. Control absolute. She lowered the phone and looked him in the eye. "Brad Miller," she said, her voice projecting to the back of the room without shouting. "As the new owner of this facility and the chairwoman of the holding company that now signs your paycheck, I am making my first executive decision." Brad's lip quivered. He knew what was coming, but hearing it was a physical blow. "You are fired," Simone stated. Brad opened his mouth to protest, to beg to say something, but Simone cut him off. "And do not bother asking about your severance package. Do not bother asking about your pension. You are being terminated for cause: gross misconduct, harassment of a client, destruction of company property, and willful negligence." She took a step closer. "You leave this building with nothing but the suit on your back. And considering how tight it is, I suggest you leave quickly before you sweat through it completely. Security will escort you to the curb. If you are found on the premises after 5 minutes, you will be arrested for trespassing." Brad slumped. It was as if his skeleton had been removed. He looked at his guards, but they were staring straight ahead, refusing to make eye contact with the dead man walking. Simone didn't waste another second on him. She turned her head slowly, locking onto the target that had been trying to blend into the marble pillar. Victoria Thorne. Victoria jumped as her name was called. She was clutching the white Himalaya Birkin bag to her chest like a life preserver. "Don't think I forgot about you," Simone said, walking past the broken form of Brad Miller. Victoria tried to muster some of her old arrogance. She straightened her back, though her hands were shaking. "You can't fire me," she spat out. "I don't work for you. I am a customer. And my husband is a United States Senator." Simone stopped. She looked at the bag. Then she looked at Victoria. A small, cold smile played on her lips. "That bag," Simone said, pointing to the purse. "You said it was worth $50,000. Victoria narrowed her eyes. "Yes, it is. It is a rare investment piece. Not that you would understand high fashion." "50,000, Simone repeated, looking thoughtful. "That is a very specific number." She turned to the crowd, raising her voice slightly so everyone, and especially Jada's phone, could hear clearly. "Isn't it interesting that just last week, the Ethics Committee launched a quiet inquiry into Senator Thorne regarding a construction kickback scheme?" The color drained from Victoria's face so fast she looked like a ghost. Simone continued, her tone conversational, but lethal. "The inquiry was about a cash bribe received on Tuesday. The amount was exactly $50,000. The room erupted in whispers. Jada gasped loud enough to be heard on the stream. Victoria took a step back, shaking her head. "That is a lie." "You are lying." "Am I?" Simone asked. "You just admitted on a live stream with 150,000 witnesses that you are walking around with a $50,000 item purchased this week. And you are terrified of a coffee stain because it would ruin the evidence of where that money went." Simone pointed at Jada. "The internet is very good at connecting dots, Victoria. I think by the time you get to your car, the FBI will have a very interesting reason to seize that bag." Victoria looked down at the purse in her hands. Suddenly, it didn't look like a status symbol anymore. It looked like an anchor dragging her down to the bottom of the ocean. You wouldn't," Victoria stammered. "I don't have to," Simone replied. "You did it to yourself. You wanted attention, Victoria. You wanted everyone to look at you." Simone spread her arms, gesturing to the phones, the cameras, and the staring crowd. "Well, look around. You are the star of the show. Smile for the camera." The silence that followed Simone's declaration was deafening. Victoria Thorne looked around the room, her eyes darting from the cell phone screens, recording her every move, to the cold, impassive face of the woman she had slapped. The reality of her situation crashed down on her like a collapsing building. The investigation, the bribe, the bag, her husband's career. It was all unraveling in real time, broadcast to the world by a teenager in the corner. Victoria's knees gave way. It wasn't a graceful descent. It was a collapse. She hit the marble floor with a heavy thud, disregarding the expensive fabric of her pants. The Himalaya Birkin bag, the object that started this entire war, slipped from her fingers and sat ignored on the floor. "Please," Victoria gasped. She reached out her hands, shaking violently, trying to grab the hem of Simone's sweatpants. "Please, Ms. Sterling, you have to stop this. You have to make them stop recording." Tears began to streak down her face, cutting through her heavy makeup. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, pathetic desperation. "If this video gets out, if the news picks up the story about the bag and the bribe, my husband is finished. He is up for re-election in November. This will destroy him. This will destroy our family." Victoria crawled forward an inch, her voice cracking into a sob. "I am begging you. I will pay for everything. I will buy you a new bag. I will pay for your flight. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Please. I have children too. Think about my children." Simone looked down. She watched the woman who had called her a transient, the woman who had thrown her baby's milk on the floor, now groveling at her feet. It was the image of total defeat. Simone took a slow, deliberate step back, pulling her leg away from Victoria's reaching hand as if she were avoiding something contagious. "Think about your children," Simone repeated, her voice low and dangerously calm. She shifted Luna in her arms, feeling the warm weight of her daughter against her chest. Did you think about my child when you screamed in her face? Did you think about my child when you threw her food on the ground? Did you think about my child when you threatened to have her taken away by the state because you didn't like my outfit? Simone shook her head, her expression hardening into diamond. You didn't care about my family, Victoria. You only care about yours now because you got caught. She looked at the weeping woman with eyes void of sympathy. You wanted me to kneel. You wanted me to beg. Well, look at you now. But unlike you, I don't get satisfaction from humiliation. I get satisfaction from justice. Before Victoria could respond, the heavy glass doors of the lounge slid open again. This time it wasn't a private security team. It was the sheriff's department. 4 uniformed officers walked in, their hands resting near their holsters, their faces serious. They didn't look at the luxury decor. They looked for the suspects. Kendrick Sterling nodded to the lead officer. He had made the call from the plane before the wheels even touched the ground. Officers, Kendrick said, his voice carrying clearly across the room. The evidence has been sent to your precinct digitally. We have multiple angles of the assault and the unlawful imprisonment. The lead officer stepped forward, pulling a pair of metal handcuffs from his belt. He walked straight past Simone and stopped in front of the woman on the floor. Victoria Thorne, the officer, said, his voice flat and professional. You are under arrest for assault and battery. We also have a federal hold request regarding a corruption investigation involving your financial assets. Victoria screamed. It was a high, thin sound of disbelief. No, you can't arrest me. Do you know who my husband is? Stand up. Ma'am, the officer ordered, reaching down to pull her to her feet. He spun her around. The click of the handcuffs locking around her wrists was the most satisfying sound the room had ever heard. You have the right to remain silent, the officer recited, marching her toward the door. Meanwhile, 2 other officers were closing in on Brad Miller. The former manager was backed against the reception desk, his face the color of old paper. He looked at the approaching police, then at Simone, and finally at his sister-in-law being dragged away. Panic overtook him. The survival instinct of a coward kicked in. Wait! Brad yelled, holding his hands up. Wait a minute, I didn't do anything. The officer grabbed Brad's arm, spinning him around to cuff him. Brad Miller, you are under arrest for unlawful imprisonment, destruction of private property, and filing a false police report. It wasn't me, Brad shrieked, struggling against the cuffs. Tears were streaming down his face now, snot bubbling at his nose. He looked wildly around the room, desperate to find a scapegoat. He pointed his chin toward Victoria, who was being led out the door. It was her. She made me do it. She told me to arrest them. I didn't want to. I was just following her orders because she is my wife's sister. Brad's voice rose to a hysterical pitch, echoing off the high ceilings. I am a victim here. She threatened me. She said she would get me fired if I didn't help her. You can't arrest me for doing my job. I am a good person. I go to church. Simone watched him, a look of pure disgust on her face. He is lying, she said simply to the officer. And I have the security footage to prove he enjoyed every second of it. The officer tightened the cuffs on Brad's wrists. Tell it to the judge, Mr. Miller. As the officers dragged Brad away, his heels dragging on the marble floor he used to rule over, he continued to sob and scream, blaming everyone but himself. The live stream comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur of laughing emojis and applause. Simone took a deep breath. The lounge was quiet again, save for the murmurs of the crowd. The toxic energy had been sucked out of the room along with the 2 people who had brought it in. She looked at her husband. Kendrick reached out and gently touched her cheek, right where the red mark from the slap was still visible. It is over, he whispered. Simone nodded. She looked at the door where the police car lights were flashing. Not yet, she said. She turned back to the room, to the staff who were standing frozen behind the bar, and the wealthy travelers who were still staring. There was one more thing that needed to be done. One final act to close the chapter and set the new standard. The fallout was swift, brutal, and public. The live stream that Jada started did not end with the arrest. It continued to ripple across the internet, gathering millions of views within hours. By the time Victoria Thorne was being booked at the county station, the stock price of her husband's construction conglomerate had plummeted 40%. The investigation into the $50,000 bribe was fast-tracked by federal agents who now had video evidence of the proceeds. By the next morning, Senator Thorne had announced his immediate resignation, citing family reasons, but the world knew the truth. His career was over, buried under the weight of his wife's arrogance. As for Brad Miller, his fate was sealed in ink. The hospitality industry talks, and Simone Sterling made sure the message was loud. His name was added to the global blacklist. He was not just fired from the Obsidian. He was effectively banned from working in any reputable hotel, resort, or lounge in the civilized world. The man who prided himself on exclusion was now permanently excluded from the life he desperately tried to cling to. But for Simone, the destruction of her enemies was not the victory. The victory was what came next. 2 days later, Sterling Vanguard issued a press release that shook the corporate world. It was titled The Luna Protocol. Named after the little girl who had been screamed at for crying, it was a sweeping set of new policies implemented across every property Simone owned. The protocol was simple but revolutionary. First, a strict zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. No warnings, no second chances. If a staff member or a guest insulted someone based on their race or appearance, they were banned for life. Second, the installation of advanced AI security systems trained to detect aggressive body language and verbal harassment, ensuring that security would intervene to protect the victim, not the aggressor. And finally, and most importantly, Simone announced the creation of the Sterling Legal Defense Fund, a $10 million endowment dedicated specifically to providing top-tier legal representation for mothers who are bullied, harassed, or threatened in public spaces. The final image of that day in Aspen was not one of conflict, but of peace. As the sun began to set behind the snow-capped mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Simone and Kendrick walked across the tarmac toward their jet. Simone was still wearing her gray sweatsuit. She didn't need a designer dress to prove her worth. She held Luna close to her chest, the toddler fast asleep, and clutching her rabbit, completely unaware that her name had just become a shield for millions of other children. Kendrick placed his hand on his wife's back as they climbed the stairs. They didn't look back at the terminal. They didn't gloat. They simply moved forward, ascending into the sky, leaving the world a little bit fairer than they found it. Justice is not just about punishing the wicked. It is about building a world where the good don't have to be afraid. Simone Sterling used her power to turn a moment of humiliation into a movement of hope. What would you have done if you were in that lounge? Would you have filmed the injustice, or would you have looked away? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe that every mother deserves to be treated with dignity, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice served cold. Because the truth is powerful, but only if we are brave enough to share it. True power never needs to shout to be heard. Simone Sterling's story serves as a powerful reminder that dignity is not defined by a price tag, and worth cannot be measured by a wardrobe. Society often makes the fatal mistake of confusing silence with weakness and humility with submission. However, as we witness, the quietest person in the room is often the one holding the keys to the kingdom. Never judge a book by its cover, and never underestimate a mother protecting her child. Real wealth isn't just about money. It is about having the capacity to demand justice when the world tries to strip you of your humanity. If you believe that respect should be mandatory and karma is best served, cold hit that like button and tell us in the comments, would you have forgiven them, or would you have pressed charges, just like Simone? Subscribe for more stories of justice.